Commander Paul Fletcher stood at the wide viewport of the EDF Relentless, watching as the last transport ships lifted off from the colony below. The red soil of New Dakota swirled around the landing pads as families carried what little they could take with them. Most would leave behind homes they had built with their own hands, farms they had coaxed from the alien soil, and memories that could never be packed away. "Third evacuation this year," said Lieutenant Diane Morris as she joined him at the viewport. Her dark eyes reflected the flashing lights of the departing ships. Fletcher nodded without turning from the view. "They promised us this world for at least 30 years. The agreement was clear." "Agreements with the Valkyrie aren't worth the data they're stored on," Morris replied. Her voice tight with anger she tried to hide. For almost 100 years, humanity had been part of the galactic hegemony. At first, humans had been welcomed as an eager new species, full of energy and ideas. The 18 alien races that made up the hegemony seemed wise and advanced, offering technology and knowledge in exchange for alliance. Earth had been honored to join. That was before humans learned the truth. The hegemony ruled by the ancient. Valkyrie race didn't want partners. They wanted servants. They wanted resources. They wanted obedient workers who would follow orders without question. And when humanity proved too independent, too innovative, too unwilling to simply obey, the hegemony began to squeeze. Fletcher watched as a young girl below clutched a small plant pot, refusing to let go even as her parents hurried her toward the waiting ship. Something about her stubborn stance made his chest tighten. "Sir," called Communications Officer Linda Powell from her station. "Message from Earth Central Command." Fletcher turned away from the viewport. "Put it through to my screen." The message was brief and coded, but Fletcher felt his heart rate increase as he read it. The Valkyrie had made a new demand. They wanted Earth's last independent research base on Mars, the one where Dr. Gregory Walsh was developing a new faster-than-light drive that didn't rely on the hegemony's controlled jump gates. "They've given us 48 hours to hand over." "The Mars Research Station," Fletcher said to Morris, keeping his voice low. "If we refuse, they're threatening pacification." Pacification, a clean word for a dirty action. Fletcher had seen the aftermath of hegemony pacification on the colony of Titan 3 years ago. Thousands dead, the survivors broken in spirit. "They can't have the Mars station," Morris whispered back. "That's our last hope for independence." Fletcher nodded. For 10 years, Dr. Walsh and his team had worked in secret, hidden beneath the ambient red dust of Mars. Their new drive technology was humanity's one chance to break free from hegemony control. Without it, humans would forever be trapped in hegemony space, forced to use their jump gates, subject to their rules and taxes and limitations. "Notify all fleet captains," Fletcher said after a long moment. "Call them to a secure meeting." Authorization code, Fletcher 97 Echo. Morris stared at him. "Sir, that's the code for ... "I know what it's for, Lieutenant." Fletcher met her gaze steadily. "It's time. Tell them we implement Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega, the plan no one had hoped to use. The complete withdrawal of humanity from hegemony space. As Morris moved away to send the coded messages, Fletcher returned to the viewport. The girl with the plant was gone now, safely aboard one of the transports. Below, the colony buildings stood empty, soon to be claimed by Valkyrie settlers who would care nothing for the work and love that had gone into creating homes there. "When did you know?" asked Chief Engineer Sam Rogers, coming to stand beside Fletcher. The older man's face was lined with years of service, his eyes tired but alert. "Know what?" Fletcher asked. "That we'd end up here. That all the promises were lies." Fletcher thought back to his first meeting with the Valkyrie High Command 7 years ago. He'd been a junior officer then, part of an Earth delegation seeking to negotiate better terms for human colonies. The Valkyrie representative, Admiral Jana Tara, had looked at him with 6 golden eyes that showed no emotion at all. Humans must understand their place, she had said. The strong lid, the useful serve. This is the natural order. I think I always knew, Fletcher replied quietly. I just didn't want to believe it. Rogers nodded. What happens when we're gone? Have the planners thought about that? Fletcher allowed himself a small smile. The hegemony has no idea how dependent they've become on us. Their ships run on navigation systems designed by human programmers. Their colonies eat food grown from seeds, adapted by human geneticists. Their medical facilities use equipment maintained by human technicians. And none of it will work properly without us. Rogers finished the thought. Exactly. They think of us as simple workers. They never understood that we build things differently than they do. On the bridge behind them, activity increased as the evacuation transports docked with the Relentless. Families would be processed, assigned quarters on the massive ship, and prepared for the long journey ahead. Sir, called Officer Powell, we have a transmission from a Valkyrie cruiser. They're demanding to know why we're removing all personnel from the colony. Fletcher turned from the viewport. Tell them we're complying with their evacuation order. They're saying the order was only for us to reduce our presence by 60%, not to abandon the colony entirely. How unfortunate that we misunderstood. Fletcher replied, his voice dry. Inform them that the evacuation is already complete and we are preparing to depart the system. As Powell relayed the message, Fletcher moved to the command chair at the center of the bridge. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They all knew what was coming. They had trained for it, prepared for it, hoped it would never be needed. Status of the evacuation? He asked. Last transport docked and secure, reported Security Chief Ben Lewis. All colonists accounted for. Status of the Valkyrie cruiser? Holding position at the edge of the system, answered Weapons Officer Judy Klein. Their weapon systems are powered, but not locked on us. Fletcher nodded. Navigation. Plot a course to the Proxima Centauri colony. Maximum speed once we clear. The gravity well. As the Relentless moved away from the colony world, Fletcher opened a channel to all decks. This is Commander Fletcher. Today marks the beginning of Operation Omega. For years, we have endured hegemony control and broken promises. We have watched as our rights were stripped away, our resources taken, our people treated as disposable assets. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Valkyrie have made a final demand that we cannot accept. They seek to take control of our Mars research station, our last hope for true independence. Rather than submit, we have chosen another path. Around him, the bridge crew stood straighter, their faces set with determination. In the coming days, all human colonies will be evacuated. Our people will gather at predetermined rally points. And then, together, we will leave hegemony space forever. Fletcher looked out at the stars visible on the main view screen. The hegemony believes we are weak. They believe we will always bend to their will. They are about to learn how wrong they are. They have pushed humanity too far. And soon, they will realize exactly what they've lost. As the Relentless accelerated away from New Dakota, Fletcher received confirmation that the coded messages had been sent to all Earth Fleet vessels and colonial governors. Across hegemony space, the greatest exodus in human history was about to begin. The Valkyrie had no idea what was coming. By the time they understood, it would be far too late. Captain Karen Mitchell guided her transport ship through the crowded space around Proxima Centauri colony. The evacuation was in its 6th day, and the precision of the human withdrawal had surprised even those who had planned it. Massive arc ships, hidden for decades in nebulae and asteroid fields, had emerged to collect the human colonists from across hegemony space. Approaching Docking Bay 7, Karen announced to her passengers over the comm system, "Please secure your belongings and prepare for docking procedures." In the co-pilot seat, Jack Harrison monitored the Valkyrie patrol ships that hovered at the edge of the system. "They're just watching," he said. "They still don't understand what we're doing." Karen nodded. The Valkyrie had expected protests when they demanded the Mars research station. They had prepared for isolated military resistance. They had not prepared for the quiet, organized departure of every human from hegemony space. Transport 7 Echo 3. Requesting final docking clearance with Arc Horizon, Karen said into her comm. "Clearance granted, 7 Echo 3, came the response. "You are our final scheduled transport. Welcome home." As the transport slid into the massive docking bay of the Arc ship, Karen felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This group of colonists would be safe. The Horizon, one of 12 arcs built in secret over the past 20 years, could house 50,000 people in comfort. Its hydroponics gardens could feed them indefinitely. Its engines could carry them beyond hegemony space to the coordinates where humanity would begin again. Once docked, Karen and Jack helped the colonists disembark. Families carried what they could: photos, heirlooms, precious items that connected them to Earth and their history. Many looked scared. Others seemed relieved. All shared the same determination to leave the hegemony behind. "Will the Valkyrie try to stop us?" asked an elderly man as Karen helped him from the transport. "They don't yet realize they should," she replied with a small smile. On the bridge of the Horizon, Admiral William Curtis oversaw the final preparations for departure. The massive view screens showed the last human structures on the Proxima colony being systematically dismantled by engineering teams. "Nothing of value gets left behind," Curtis reminded his officers. "If it can't be brought aboard, it gets destroyed." On the colony below, automated charges were being set in factories, research facilities, and infrastructure systems. The hegemony would find nothing but empty buildings and disabled equipment. When they arrived to claim their prize, a young communications officer approached Curtis with a datapad. "Sir, we've received the update from Mars. Dr. Walsh reports the FTL drive installations are at 97% completion on all arcs. They'll be ready when we rendezvous at the jump point." Curtis nodded his approval. Gregory Walsh and his team had achieved what the hegemony had thought impossible. The new FTL drive didn't require the fixed jump gates that the Valkyrie controlled. It could create corridors through space with no fixed endpoints. Humanity could go where the hegemony couldn't follow. Status of the other evacuations? Curtis asked his executive officer. 87% complete across all colonies, came the reply. Europa Station reports full evacuation. Titan Research Base reports 95% personnel extracted. Earth reports civilian evacuation at 79% with priority for children and essential specialists. The speed of the evacuation had been made possible by years of quiet preparation. The arcs had been built in secret. Essential personnel had been briefed on evacuation protocols. Supplies had been stockpiled. When Commander Fletcher had given the order to implement Protocol Omega, humanity had been ready. On Mars, Dr. Gregory Walsh wiped sweat from his forehead as he made final adjustments to the FTL drive core. The red planet's thin atmosphere required them to work in pressurized domes, but it also provided excellent cover from hegemony surveillance. "Power readings are stable," reported his assistant, Alan Reyes. "Core temperature holding within acceptable limits," Walsh nodded. 20 years of work was about to pay off. 20 years of secret research, hidden funding, and midnight calculations. The Valkyrie had thought humans were just clever animals who could build things according to hegemony designs. They had never understood that human innovation went far, beyond merely following established patterns. "The Valkyrie delegation is demanding to speak with you," said another assistant, entering the control room. "They're threatening military action if we don't restore the mining operations in sectors 4 through 9. Walsh didn't look up from his calculations. "Tell them we'll be gone before they can mobilize their fleet. And remind them what happens when we leave." Throughout hegemony space, automated systems were already beginning their programmed shutdowns. The brilliant adaptive algorithms created by human programmers began degrading without human maintenance. The bioengineered crops developed by human geneticists began failing without their creators' care. On the Valkyrie homeworld, Admiral Jana Tara stood before the Hegemony High Command, her 6 golden eyes narrowed with concern. "The humans are leaving," she reported, "not just the Mars facility, all of them. Every colony, research station, and outpost is being evacuated." Supreme Overlord Kaxar of the Valkyrie leaned forward on his ceremonial throne. "Let them leave. If they wish to abandon their duties to the hegemony, we will find other races to replace them." "With respect, Overlord," Janitara continued, "we're receiving reports of systems failures across hegemony space. The neural networks that control our agricultural distribution are showing errors. The medical facilities on 3 core worlds report equipment malfunctions. And the translation matrices for interspecies communication are developing gaps." Kaxar waved a dismissive hand. "Minor inconveniences. The humans are technicians, nothing more. Their skills can be replaced." But even as he spoke, his personal communicator flickered and died. Across the hegemony capital, lights dimmed as power systems designed and maintained by human engineers began to fail. "They've designed everything to break," Janitara realized aloud. "Not immediately, but inevitably. Without their maintenance, none of it will last." For the first time, Kaxar felt a flicker of concern. "Stop them," he commanded. "We cannot allow them to leave. Send the fleet to the human colonies and prevent any further evacuations." But the order came too late. By the time hegemony warships arrived at human colonies, they found only empty buildings and disabled equipment. The Arcs had already departed, leaving behind automated charges that reduced any valuable technology to useless debris. On the horizon, Karen Mitchell stood with Admiral Curtis as the massive ship prepared to depart Proxima Centauri. The last of the charges on the colony below had detonated, leaving nothing of use for the hegemony to claim. "All Arcs report ready for departure," said the communications officer. "Rendezvous coordinates are set for the Mars jump point." Curtis nodded. "Take us out, navigator. Full power to engines once we clear the gravity well." As the massive Arc ship moved away from the colony that had been humanity's first home among the stars, Karen thought about the future that awaited them beyond hegemony space. Dr. Walsh's FTL drive would take them to star systems the Valkyrie had never explored. Humanity would build new colonies, new homes, new lives free from hegemony control. "They never understood us," Karen said quietly to herself, as the stars stretched before them. "They thought our greatest value was in our labor, our obedience. They never realized our true strength was in our minds, our creativity, our ability to adapt." The Valkyrie had pushed humanity too far. In their arrogance, they had believed humans would always bend to their will. Instead, humanity had chosen freedom, even at the cost of leaving behind the worlds they had settled. And in their absence, the mighty hegemony was about to discover just how dependent they had become on the species they had dismissed as merely useful servants. 6 months after humanity's exodus, the hegemony was in crisis. Supreme Overlord Kaxar of the Valkyrie stood before the hegemony council chamber, facing angry representatives of all 18 member species. The once dignified chamber had descended into shouting and accusations. "The Centaurian food processors have completely failed," shouted the Drexian ambassador. His scaled skin flushed a dark purple with anger. "Without human technicians, we cannot maintain them. 3 billion of my people face starvation within the month. The terraforming projects on our outer colonies have collapsed," added the Nix representative, her voice trembling. "The atmospheric. Regulators no longer respond to our commands. Colonists are being evacuated, but we've already lost thousands to toxic air conditions." Kaxar raised his hands for silence, but the chamber continued in chaos. Reports from across hegemony space told the same story. Systems were failing. Equipment was breaking down. Crops were dying, and no one knew how to fix any of it. The humans built redundancies into everything they designed, explained Science Minister Vexil when the noise finally subsided enough for him to speak. Systems that would function for years without maintenance, but would ultimately require human expertise to sustain. We never realized how dependent we had become on their ingenuity. In the medical districts of the hegemony capital, hospitals struggled with malfunctioning equipment. The revolutionary medical nanets designed by Dr. Olivia Collins had begun. Failing, their programmed lifespans ending without her team to replenish them. Patients with conditions easily treatable 6 months ago now faced uncertain futures. "How did we not see this coming?" demanded Kaxar in a private meeting with his advisors after the council session. A junior analyst, Turvak, stepped forward hesitantly. "We assumed their compliance was weakness, Your Eminence. We never considered it might be patience." The truth was dawning on the hegemony leadership. Humans hadn't just been useful workers. They had been the innovators, the problem solvers, the ones who found elegant solutions where other species saw only obstacles. Their adaptability, creativity, and resilience had become the foundation upon which much of the hegemony's advanced technology secretly relied. "Find them," ordered Kaxar. "Whatever the cost, we must bring them back." Scout ships had been dispatched to track the human exodus, but they had disappeared beyond the reaches of known space, following a propulsion signature unlike anything in hegemony records. The humans had simply vanished, taking their knowledge and skills with them. On the colony world of SciFiPrime, once a showcase of hegemony prosperity, food riots had broken out in the major cities. The bioengineered crops that fed the massive urban populations had failed, their carefully balanced genetics destabilizing without the constant adjustments made by human scientists. Governor Lefta of the Braxi race surveyed the damage from his secure tower. Smoke rose from several districts where hunger had turned to violence. His security forces were stretched thin, and the next supply shipment from the agricultural worlds was already 2 weeks overdue. "Have we recovered anything useful from the human agricultural facilities?" he asked his chief scientist. "Nothing, Governor. They disabled all their equipment before leaving. The seed banks were emptied. The genetic sequence archives were wiped. We've tried to replicate their methods, but their approach to genetic engineering was unlike our own. They used intuitive leaps our scientists don't understand. In the shipyards orbiting the Valkyrie homeworld, engineers struggled to maintain the massive fleet that had enforced hegemony will across the galaxy. The ship's neural navigation systems, designed by human programmers, had begun showing errors that no one knew how to fix. "The code is changing," reported Chief Engineer Dravek to Admiral Janatara. "The humans designed the systems to adapt and evolve, but without their oversight, the changes have become unpredictable. 3 cruisers are already dead in space. Their navigation completely failed." Janatara, once so dismissive of humans now, felt fear when she thought of the species she had helped drive away. "Can we rewrite the systems from scratch? Return to our own technology?" "We have lost those skills," admitted Dravek. "For 50 years, we've relied on human innovations. Our own engineers now specialize in maintaining human-designed systems. not creating new ones. It would take decades to rediscover what we once knew, let alone replace what the humans gave us. In the hegemony's central archives, researchers worked frantically to recover human knowledge from any source they could find. But the humans had been thorough. Their databases had been wiped, their research facilities emptied. Even their living quarters had been cleared of any materials that might provide insights into their methods. They planned this for years, realized Head Archivist Palana as she reviewed security footage showing humans systematically removing or destroying their work in the months before the Exodus. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction to our demands. This was a coordinated strategy they had prepared for long ago. The hegemony had always prided itself on understanding and controlling its member species. Each race had its place, its purpose, its value to the greater whole. The Valkyrie led because of their ancient wisdom and strategic thinking. The Drexians provided raw materials from their mining worlds. The Nyx maintained the vast communication networks that connected the Empire. Humans? They had been classified as clever builders and useful technicians. No one had recognized them as the innovative force driving the hegemony's technological advancement for the past century. In his private chambers, Supreme Overlord Kaxar reviewed the latest reports from across hegemony space. Power failures on 7 core worlds. Transportation systems breaking down on 12 others. Communication networks becoming increasingly unreliable. And the first reports of food shortages reaching even the privileged central planets. "We must find them," he said again to his most trusted advisor. "Send every available scout ship beyond the known territories. Follow any trace of their passage. Offer anything they want in return for their return." But the scout ships found nothing. The humans had used their new FTL technology to travel to regions of space no hegemony vessel could reach. Without access to the fixed jump gates that had always controlled travel in the Empire, the Valkyrie were limited in their search. On the medical world of Helios, Dr. Jorzin struggled to treat patients with increasingly primitive methods as the advanced diagnostic equipment failed around him. Once, he had worked alongside human doctors, often dismissing their intuitive approaches to medicine as unscientific compared to the Valkyrie's methodical procedures. Now, as he lost another patient to a condition that would have been easily cured. 6 months ago, he remembered his human colleague, Dr. Frank Miller. Miller had always insisted on understanding the principles behind the technology rather than simply following established protocols. He had kept paper notebooks with observations and ideas a practice Jorzin had mocked as archaic. "They tried to teach us," he realized as he washed blood from his hands, "but we were too proud to learn." Throughout the hegemony, similar realizations were dawning. The humans had not been merely workers following hegemony designs. They had been the driving creative force behind the Empire's greatest advancements. Their unique way of thinking, combining logic with intuition, theory with practicality, respect for tradition with willingness to experiment, had fueled a century of progress that the hegemony had claimed as its own. And now they were gone. Taking their invaluable perspective with them, in the hegemony council chamber, now empty of the angry representatives, who had been dismissed until solutions could be found, Kaxar stood alone at the large viewing window. The glittering capital city spread below him, its lights noticeably dimmer than they had been months ago, as power systems continued to degrade. "We pushed them too far," he admitted to himself, "and we may have destroyed ourselves in the process." For the first time in his long life, the supreme overlord of the mighty hegemony felt something new: regret. 3 years into humanity's self-imposed exile, the first hegemony contact ships discovered the edge of human territory. What they found astonished them. Humanity had established a thriving civilization spanning dozens of star systems, connected by Dr. Walsh's revolutionary FTL network. Free from hegemony restrictions, human innovation had flourished. Their worlds were protected by defense systems, unlike anything the hegemony possessed. The hegemony scout vessel Relentless Hunter dropped out of FTL at the coordinates where their long-range sensors had detected unusual energy signatures. Captain Mev Tar of the Valkyrie expected to find perhaps a small human outpost or research station. Instead, his crew found themselves facing an entire fleet of ships surrounding a massive space station. The design of both ships and station were unlike anything in hegemony records. "We are being scanned," reported his sensor officer. "Multiple targeting systems have locked onto our position." Before Mevtar could respond, a communication request came through. The face that appeared on his view screen was human, a female with dark hair and a formal uniform bearing insignia he did not recognize. "Hegemony vessel, this is Commander Samantha Reed of the Alliance Defense Fleet. You have entered restricted space. State your purpose or withdraw immediately." Mevtar, chosen for this mission because of his previous diplomatic experience with humans, carefully controlled his surprise. "This is Captain Mevtar of the hegemony scout ship Relentless Hunter. We seek peaceful contact with human authorities. Our mission is diplomatic in nature." The human commander studied him for a moment. "Transmit your credentials and crew manifest. Once verified, you will be escorted to Nexus Station. Any deviation from the assigned course will be considered hostile action." As the hegemony ship followed its escort through the human defense perimeter, Mevtar observed the level of development around him with growing unease. The humans had not spent the last 3 years struggling to survive. They had been building, innovating, and preparing. Nexus Station proved to be a massive structure serving as both defensive outpost and diplomatic hub at the border of human space. The Relentless Hunter docked at an assigned bay where Mevtar and a small delegation were met by human security officers who escorted them through corridors busy with activity. "Their technology has advanced significantly," whispered his science officer. "These systems are generations beyond what they used in hegemony space." Mevtar nodded. The humans had clearly been holding back their true capabilities during their time as hegemony members. Or perhaps, freed from hegemony restrictions, they had simply accelerated their natural rate of innovation. The hegemony delegation was brought to a large meeting room where several humans waited. At their center sat a woman with gray-streaked hair and a calm, measured expression. "I am Ambassador Elizabeth Tanner," she said as they entered. "I represent the Alliance of Independent Systems in discussions with outside entities. Welcome to Nexus Station, Captain Mevtar." Mevtar performed the formal Valkyrie greeting, inclining his head and spreading his 4 arms in the traditional gesture of peaceful intent. "I bring greetings from Supreme Overlord Kaxar of the Galactic Hegemony. I am authorized to open diplomatic channels between our peoples." Tanner nodded, but did not smile. "It has been 3 years since we departed hegemony space. Why seek contact now?" The directness of the question was typical of humans, Mevtar knew. Unlike the Valkyrie, who preferred lengthy diplomatic preliminaries, humans often valued what they called getting to the point. "The hegemony extends an invitation for humanity to rejoin our galactic community," he said, choosing his words carefully. "We offer reparations for past misunderstandings and recognition of humanity's valuable contributions to hegemony prosperity." Tanner studied him, her expression revealing nothing. "Misunderstandings? You systematically exploited our people, harvested our worlds, and threatened our existence when we refused to surrender our last independent research facility. Those aren't misunderstandings, Captain." Mevtar had been prepared for human directness, but not for the cold anger behind her words. "Perhaps we failed to fully appreciate humanity's contributions," he admitted. "No," corrected Tanner. "You failed to understand that humanity's greatest strength isn't in what we build, it's in how we think. You saw our adaptability as primitive, our creativity as inefficient, our resilience as stubborn defiance. You never realized these were the very qualities that made everything we built for you work. From a side door, another human entered and whispered something to Tanner. Mevtar recognized him from intelligence briefings as Ryan Bailey, formerly a minor official in Earth's diplomatic corps, now apparently a senior figure in the human government. Your vessels at the edge of the system have powered up their weapon systems, Tanner said, her voice hardening. That seems inconsistent with a diplomatic mission. Mevtar felt a flash of anger. He had not been informed of backup vessels, let alone any orders for them to present a military threat. I assure you, Ambassador, I was not aware of any such actions. My mission is purely diplomatic. Tanner exchanged glances with Bailey, then nodded. We've deactivated their targeting systems remotely. They pose no threat now. The casual mention of being able to remotely disable hegemony warships sent a chill through Mevtar. Such technology was thought impossible. The implications were clear. In the 3 years since leaving hegemony space, humans had developed capabilities that rendered traditional hegemony military advantages obsolete. The hegemony is suffering without human innovation, Mevtar said, deciding that honesty might serve better than the careful diplomatic script he had prepared. Our systems are failing. Our colonies face shortages. Our medical facilities cannot maintain equipment. We propose a new partnership, one of equals. Tanner smiled slightly. Equals? After a century of treating us as servants, that's a significant change in perspective. Necessity has provided new clarity, Mevtar replied. Tanner leaned forward. Let me be clear, Captain. The days of humanity serving the hegemony are over. We've built something here that works for us, a true alliance of equals among our colonies and settlements. We're open to dialogue with the hegemony, but only as an independent power negotiating with another independent power. Behind her, through the large viewport that dominated one wall of the meeting room, Mevtar could see ships moving in careful patterns, a defense fleet conducting drills. The ships bore little resemblance to the human vessels he remembered from hegemony space. These were sleek, powerful, and clearly built for more than simple transport or minor defense duties. What would such dialogue involve? He asked. First, recognition of the alliance of independent systems as a sovereign entity with all the rights and privileges that entails. Second, formal apologies and reparations for the treatment of human colonies under hegemony rule. Third, negotiation of fair trade agreements that benefit both our civilizations. The terms were steep, but Mevtar had been authorized to agree to almost anything that would bring human expertise back to the failing hegemony. And in return, we would consider providing technical assistance to address the most critical infrastructure. Failures in hegemony space, not as servants or subjects, but as contractors paid fairly for our expertise. It was less than the hegemony had hoped for, but more than they deserved, Mevtar knew. The humans were in a position of strength and knew it, yet they were not demanding surrender or offering humiliation. They were offering a path forward, one that respected both sides. I believe these terms could form the basis of productive discussions, Mevtar said carefully. I will communicate them to my government. Tanner nodded. Your ship will be allowed to transmit a message to hegemony space. In the meantime, you and your delegation are welcome to remain aboard Nexus Station as our guests. As the meeting concluded and human officials escorted the hegemony delegation to their assigned quarters, Mevtar found himself re-evaluating everything he had been taught about humans. The Valkyrie had always prided themselves on their strategic thinking, their ability to plan for centuries. Yet they had completely misunderstood the long game humanity had been playing all along. The humans had never been conquered. They had been biding their time, learning, adapting, and preparing for the day when they would reclaim their independence. And now, having achieved that freedom, they were offering not revenge but cooperation, albeit on their terms. Viewport in his quarters, Mevtar watched the bustling activity around Nexus Station. Human ships moved with purpose. Construction vessels worked on expanding the station's outer rings. Everything spoke of a civilization on the rise, not a refugee population struggling to survive. The hegemony had pushed humanity too far in doing so. They had not destroyed their useful servants. They had created a powerful new force in the galaxy. One that might, if the Valkyrie were wise enough to accept the new reality, help save the Empire from its own arrogance. 10 years after humanity's exodus, the galaxy had transformed. The human-led alliance of independent systems now matched the hegemony in power and territory. The Valkyrie, once the undisputed masters of galactic civilization, had been forced to accept a new reality, one where humanity was not just an equal, but in many ways a superior power. Admiral Paul Fletcher, now with gray at his temples, but still commanding the EDF Relentless, stood on the observation deck of Unity Station as the combined fleet prepared for its demonstration. Representatives from both the hegemony and the alliance had gathered to witness the culmination of the new Treaty of Mutual Cooperation. "Hard to believe we've come this far," said General Diane Morris, who had risen through the ranks alongside Fletcher, from nearly being exterminated to dictating terms. Fletcher watched as ships from both civilizations moved into formation below. Alliance vessels, sleek and powerful, flew alongside the more ornate but less advanced hegemony ships. The sight would have been unimaginable a decade ago. "We never wanted dominance," Fletcher reminded her. "Just the freedom to determine our own destiny." The decade since the Exodus had seen enormous changes for both civilizations. The hegemony, faced with the collapse of its technological infrastructure, had been forced to humble itself and accept human assistance on human terms. The initial technical aid had evolved into a more complex relationship, with human specialists helping to restore critical systems while carefully ensuring the hegemony did not become dependent on them again. For humanity, the years of freedom had unleashed an unprecedented era of innovation and growth. Without hegemony restrictions, human creativity had flourished. The Alliance now spanned over 60 star systems, connected by Dr. Walsh's revolutionary FTL network that allowed travel without reliance on fixed jump gates. Below them in the diplomatic chamber, President Nicole Winters addressed the assembled dignitaries. The new FTL network, jointly maintained by human and hegemony engineers, would connect their civilizations while respecting the sovereignty of all participating worlds. "This network represents more than just a technological achievement," Winters said to the gathered representatives. "It symbolizes a new relationship between our peoples. No longer will travel and commerce be controlled by any single power. No longer will member worlds be isolated if they disagree with central authority. This network ensures freedom of movement for all, under the protection of both the Alliance and the hegemony." Among the hegemony delegation, Supreme Counselor Jana Tara watched with mixed emotions. Once Admiral Jana Tara, she had been one of the strongest voices pushing for harsh measures against human independence. Now, she led a reformed hegemony council where the Valkyrie were merely first among equals rather than unquestioned rulers. The past decade had been humbling for the Valkyrie. Their empire, once seemingly unshakable, had teetered on the brink of collapse without human innovation to sustain it. Only the carefully negotiated assistance agreements with the Alliance had prevented widespread famine and civil unrest. Dr. Gregory Walsh, now director of the Alliance Science Division, joined Fletcher and Morris on the observation deck. The FTL drive he had developed had transformed not just human civilization, but the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Unlike the old hegemony jump gates, which could be controlled or shut down from central locations, the new network was distributed and resilient. No single authority could cut off a world or region from the rest of galactic society. "The Valkyrie still don't fully understand us," observed Walsh, watching the proceedings below. "They think our technology is our strength." "But it's never been about the technology," agreed Fletcher. "It's about what drives us to create it." In the decades since the Exodus, humanity had continued to innovate at a pace that astonished their former oppressors. The Alliance worlds flourished with technology that worked in harmony with natural environments rather than exploiting them, a philosophy the resource-depleted hegemony was now desperately trying to adopt. Most significantly, several former hegemony species had petitioned to join the Alliance, attracted by humanity's more collaborative approach to governance and innovation. The Drexians, long exploited for their mining skills, had been the first to break away. The Nix had followed shortly after, bringing their expertise in communications technology to the Alliance. As the demonstration began, a synchronized jump of hundreds of vessels through the new FTL network, Fletcher reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "They pushed us too far," he said quietly. "And in doing so, they freed us to become what we were always meant to be." In the 10 years since humanity had left hegemony space, they had built not just new homes, but a new way of living. Alliance worlds were governed by democratic councils, with decisions made through consultation and consensus rather than imperial decree. Resources were shared based on need rather than power. Innovation was encouraged at all levels of society. That the contrast with the old hegemony model could not have been more stark. There, the Valkyrie had ruled for millennia based on the principle that the strong should dominate the weak, that lesser species existed to serve greater ones. That system had brought them empire, but it had also brought stagnation. Without the creative spark of truly free minds, the hegemony had been slowly dying even before humanity's departure had accelerated the decline. Now, the Valkyrie were learning painful but necessary lessons. The reformed Hegemony Council included representatives from all member species, not just the ruling race. Resource distribution had been restructured to benefit all worlds, not just the core systems. And most importantly, innovation and independent thinking were now encouraged rather than suppressed. As the fleet demonstration concluded to applause from the gathered dignitaries, President Winters and Supreme Counselor Jean Altara met at the Hyangko center of the diplomatic chamber to formally sign the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation. The document, the product of years of careful negotiation, established new rules for trade, diplomatic relations, and territorial boundaries between the Alliance and the hegemony. "This treaty marks not an ending, but a beginning," said Winters, as she signed her name. "A beginning of a relationship based on mutual respect and cooperation." Jean Tara, adding her signature beside the human leaders, nodded in agreement. The hegemony acknowledges past errors and commits to a new path forward. "We have much to learn from humanity, just as we hope humanity may yet learn from our ancient wisdom." The formal words concealed the deeper truth that everyone in the chamber understood. The hegemony had not willingly chosen this new path. It had been forced upon them by the consequences of their own actions. They had pushed humanity too far, and in doing so, had destroyed the foundation of their own power. From the observation deck, Fletcher watched the ceremony with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The nightmare scenario that had led to Protocol Omega, the complete extinction of human independence, had been averted. Instead, humanity had not only survived, but thrived. And in the process, they had transformed the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. "What happens now?" asked Morris, watching as delegates from both civilizations mingled below, former enemies, now cautious allies. "We build," replied Fletcher simply. "We explore. We keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. That's what humans do." Walsh smiled. And this time we do it as equals, not servants. As the ceremony concluded and the delegates moved to the reception area, Fletcher caught sight of a young Valkyrie officer watching the human delegates with undisguised curiosity. Unlike the older Valkyrie, whose golden eyes still often reflected disdain or resentment when they looked at humans, this young officer's gaze held something different. Respect and perhaps even admiration. It was in the younger generations that the true change would come, Fletcher knew. Those who grew up in this new galaxy would not remember the old hierarchies, the old prejudices. They would know only a universe where different species worked together, each contributing their unique strengths to the greater whole. The Valkyrie had pushed humanity too far, and in doing so, they had not only lost their servants, but found their equals. Perhaps in time, they might even find something they had never thought to seek: friends.